Karls Zukunft der Woche mit Zukunftsforscher Michael Karl und Gästen.
Welcome back. This is Karl's Future of the Week, Karl's Zukunft der Woche. Welcome to this tiny platform where we engage in the dialogue on future topics of different sorts. And it's always two questions we raise again and again. One is, what do we expect? What can we expect? What do we have to expect? Second question, what do we want? Laying out a picture or pictures of desirable futures. That is what we want to do here. This week in English, because we have a guest from UK, which is great fun. Bartosiak-Jentys from Supplant. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Jeremy, you are Chief Scientific Officer at Supplant, UK-based. And to put it simple, you're working in the field of bioeconomy between agriculture and food, and you're replacing sugar in food. Well, that's what I understood. We're going deeper in this. We met just recently at IBC 11, International Bioeconomy Conference, and I thought this is really fascinating. I'd like to know more about it. And here we are. I even tried cookies baked with your non-sugar. Quite good. So to start, you're saying we don't need sugar in food anymore?
Yes. So to put it one way, the food industry and the food system of the 20th century did fantastic things. It fed a growing population most fantastically well. But the difference is some places now are almost, we have too much of a good thing. And so now we have to think about how we kind of balance our diet again, back to having more fiber in our diet, less carbohydrate. And so that's where our ingredient really fits in. It helps us to replace the sugar in food using agricultural side streams. And so we make more food, and it's better for you as well, from things that are already in the food system and currently go to waste.
So we used to have something else than classical sugar in drinks. We have Coke Zero, etc., for years and years and years. Where's the problem in food?
Yes, it's a real challenge. So in drinks, sugar really, the majority of the role it plays is in sweetness. It doesn't really do any other things functional in that drink. But in food, sugar plays a really important kind of physical and chemical role in our food. So it makes it taste sweet, but also gives it bulk. It also gives it color, things like caramel colors and aromas and flavors. And it also does things like make our ice cream soft when it comes out the freezer, so stops it freezing too hard. So there's all these really intricate roles that sugar plays that makes it really difficult to replace in food products.
And you found a way to replace it. So what do you use?
So the company was founded in 2017 by Tom Simmons, who's our current CEO and founder. It was really his insight into bringing the worlds of plant science and plant biochemistry together with the food industry that came across this solution to say, well, it's not just one thing that we can replace sugar with, because replacing sugar with one thing is just replacing it with sugar.
That's not what we want, right?
No, exactly. So, to have the function of sugar, but not to use sugar itself, you have to use a mixture of things. And that's the plant extract that we use. So we take these agricultural side streams and we extract a mixture from them, and that mixture behaves like sugar in food.
I'm always looking out not to lose anyone in the talk. So what's an agricultural side stream? That's something that grows on the field, but no one ever uses it, right?
I wouldn't say never uses, but it's put to low value use. So think about things like the wheat straw that's left over after you've harvested the grains. Mm-hmm. There is a use for it, but it's not a high value use, and there's plenty left over. You can think about things like corn cobs, which are the middle of a piece of corn, or the husk of an oat. So oat milk production is very popular now, lots more oats being grown. But then we now have many more of these leaves that sit around the oat grain. And those are the sorts of things we use. So currently they have low value uses, but we think we can put them to a better use.
So in the end, you're connecting two problems to find one new solution, right? So on the one hand, you have the people in agriculture who think, well, we don't really know what to do with this material we have here. And on the other side, you want to produce a replacement for sugar, and you connect those, right? So you're selling two products in one.
Or two solutions in one, maybe. Yeah. No, absolutely right. The pesticides, the water, the fertilizer has already gone into growing the grain, but also all these other parts of the plant already. So we've already spent the energy up front to make and produce this material. But yeah, it's currently underutilized, and there's a lot of it. Depending on the plant, it could be as much as half of the weight of the plant. So you're almost making as much grain as you are, as much waste as you are grain in some crops. And so there's a lot of it around, and not very many uses, or not very many high value uses for it.
So you managed to produce something that really, put it in simple terms again, that really behaves like sugar. So I could take it and bake a cake.
Yeah, and we've done that in the past. We've given people a bag of our sugar and a standard cake recipe, and said, go home and try it out and see how you get on with it. And it's, even for an amateur baker, it's very easy to use because it's a one-for-one replacement for sugar in standard recipes like the biscuits that you tried, or a sponge cake, or even if you want to be a bit more intricate in an ice cream.
But I was wondering, reducing sugar in food is not really a new idea. We've been hearing this years and years and years for reasons. I read again and again, sugar is not only something to be reduced, but in fact, the way we use it, it's really dangerous. It does harm to people, big scale. You managed to come up with an idea how to replace it. I mean, obviously, you're a crowd of geniuses, and you found out how to do it. But why didn't anyone before came up with something we could use here? I mean, it's a major topic.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's a macro trend in the food industry for about the last 40 years. Sugar reduction. Mm-hmm. I think part of it is actually a mindset thing, as scientists, food technologists, we're trained that a pure molecule has a function. So we have a very kind of dogmatic view of a structure and a function. Mm-hmm. But actually, the real world is built up of formulations. So things mixed together to give the function that people want. And I think that's the change in the insight. Given that our ingredient is a whole plant extract, it is a mixture of things, and it is moving away from that dogmatic view of the world of one structure, one function, that actually allows you to do that. Because all previous attempts have been very much, it is a molecule or a small selection of molecules that have been proposed. Nothing is kind of different, or a different approach or a different way of thinking as our ingredient that has actually kind of come up with a solution.
It's interesting what mindsets do, right? Is there any magic in your product?
You're always conscious say yes, because you've got something that has not been seen before. So don't want to downplay it in terms of the fact that it's taken a lot of work, and it creates functionality and a value proposition that other ingredients simply haven't so far. So magic from that perspective, yes, but from a fundamental scientific point of view, if you were going to look at it that way, it's based on sound, first principle science. And so there's not magic from that perspective, but in terms of how it's all come together, I think you could describe it as there's something magical about it.
Well, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, the question I was trying to get closer to was, do you sometimes come across reactions like, can I trust this? Is this something I can rely on as a healthy product, as a healthy ingredient?
Yeah, so I think that there's two groups there. I think there are some people who hear the story, the background, the idea, the thesis, and then try the ingredient and say, okay, right, that's enough for me, and I'm I'm satisfied that this is a route forward. There are others, that we provide hard data for. So we conduct clinical tolerance studies, for example, to show how people react to the ingredient, and the answer is well. So we've done studies that are comparable with other sugar replacement ingredients and with sugar itself, actually, in terms of how well it's tolerated by people. And then we do greenhouse gas emissions and life cycle analyses to prove that actually there's no unintended consequences of running our process in our way. So there's the storytelling part, but it's all backed up with hard data as well. So absolutely, there'll be certain things that some people are skeptical about, but hopefully we can either more quickly or more slowly win them over.
Yes, and on the other hand, we do eat things where we don't really want to know where things come from and how they're produced and processed. People eat a lot of stuff, my impression. Speaking of hard data, I think we need to establish the picture. Compared to sugar, your non-sugar is what? Less calories? Give us the basic data.
Yeah. So the ingredient itself is less than half the calories of sugar. It has a 88% reduction in your blood glucose spike. So normally when you eat sugar, you feel this kind of big rush of energy followed by a bit of a lull. Whereas
that's where you take the second cookie usually.
Exactly, yeah, to top up the sugar high. So we don't have that. It's far more kind of gentle, so reduced by 88%. And the ingredient's also prebiotic because it's made from fiber. It behaves like fiber in your body, and that is good for your gut bacteria as well.
So it makes things easier to digest, right?
So I wouldn't say easier to digest, because that's part of the thing that's missing in the Western diet is fiber, which is more difficult to digest, and that's what our ingredient is based on. But it's, let's say, for digestive balance, I think it's the way you can look at it, that it's beneficial from that point of view.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about the ecological dimension?
Yes. So as I mentioned, essentially we're making more food from things that already exist but aren't being used. So, for example, you can have a 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions versus sugar, and then an even greater reduction versus some other sugar replacement ingredients that start with sugar as a starting point. So they make sugar and then have to make another ingredient. So the greenhouse gas savings are much greater than that. And you have greater than 90% savings in water usage because you've already invested that to make the other crop, and also a greater than 90% saving in land usage. So you don't have to expand into new virgin territories to produce more food because you're using everything or more of what you've already produced on the same area of land that's already under agricultural practice.
So it sounds like we do have one of these rare cases here where we listen to it and say, well, that's what we probably need and want. Give us an idea on a scale between like the homegrown lab where you start and the full-size, full-scale global facility where you like cater the whole world. Whereabouts are you on your journey?
Yeah, I'd say we're about a third of the way along that.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of technically, we've proven that we can make the ingredient, and also commercially that we can sell the ingredient, and we've done that at a relatively large scale. So we're talking about 20,000 litre tanks that we do our reaction in. But then sugar is a very large commodity ingredient, and so us producing hundreds of tons does not compete with the hundreds of thousands of tons that a single sugar factory produces. So it's more a question of the technical proof points are validated, but it's more the scaling of the process into larger facilities that's left for us to do, and that's quite expensive. So you have to really prove out the technical and commercial capabilities beforehand, rather than ending up with something that's very expensive and doesn't work. And we definitely don't want to do that.
No, of course not. Who would want to? So it's time for engineers at the moment, right?
So that's certainly part of it. How do you put something together that operates every single day of the year, 24/7, producing our ingredient at a cost that is competitive with sugar itself? So it means we can do that large mainstream reduction and touch as many consumers as possible. So yes, absolutely, engineers have a place.
I imagine that one or two people could listen to this and say, well, that sounds interesting. I want to try it. And I do live in Europe. Do I have a chance to buy something that is made with your ingredient?
Unfortunately, not in Europe. So our first market is the US, and that's purely from a regulatory point of view. So our ingredient has a generally regarded as safe status, and that's done by expert panel in the US. Unfortunately, there isn't the equivalent in Europe. There is only a full European it's called a novel foods application, and it's quite expensive, and it takes quite a lot of time. And by quite expensive, I mean over €1 million, and by takes a lot of time, potentially over 2 years to achieve.
That is something I want to dig a bit deeper in. We all agree on we need to cut sugar intake. And we have all these wonderful marketing brochures from whoever does those, promoting this idea, and all these policies saying, well, this is our strategy. We want healthier food and we want healthier people, etc. But at the same time, we in Europe, we do have procedures which prevent us from getting this. Do I get this right?
I think you put it very politely and delicately, but yeah, you're but fundamentally, yes, you're right. Europe is actually taking.
Well, that's not really clever.
It's a little bit disconnected, because actually Europe is taking the lead from a policy perspective on foods and other foods, chemicals, materials. Actually, Europe is leading the way from a policy impetus, or the way that governments across Europe want to shape the future of their countries, and what we consume and how our economies are based. I think there's a slight disconnect in terms of then the realities of wanting something and delivering that thing, and allowing it to come to the fore. And that's really where certainly from a food perspective, safety is massively important. The last thing you want to do is to cause harm in society. However, there are other ways, and there are stepping stones that can be put in place to allow novel foods, and that's not just our sugar. That's in the space of protein as well, which again, there's policy being written about it almost daily, but the action or the environment that's being created doesn't necessarily support the policy intentions.
Now, you have been very polite in your a slight disconnect. I think I need to remember that phrase. again, it doesn't sound very clever if you ask me. And the one thing I don't understand is, of course, we don't want unsafe food. Who would want that? That's a no-brainer. But the logic we apply here is, correct me if I'm wrong, we do have food, and because we have it, we regard it as safe. And then there's other things, and they're new, and therefore we regard them as unsafe. But you could, in the case of sugar, turn things around, and you could say, well, the way we use sugar is basically unsafe, and we need to replace it. And that's what I don't get these two sides together. Can you?
No, exactly. It's the action matching the intention and thinking about the world slightly differently. So maybe there are, as you say, priority topics that we say, look, this is actually damaging to us in the way we do it today. So it's, I think the challenge is because things like sugar consumption is a tends to be a long-term chronic problem. So no one becomes acutely sick from consuming too much sugar. It's something that builds up over time. You get the obesity, the diabetes, heart disease, all those sorts of things that sugar, long-term overconsumption of sugar is associated with. Whereas our safety and regulatory is very concerned about things that will acutely make you unwell. So you consume it and then very quickly you will become unwell. The long-term safety is absolutely part of it. But you get the sense that the regulators are kind of thinking about, is it, eat it and something bad will happen almost instantaneously. Whereas if you look at the long-term view, like you've just described, absolutely, I think there's a case for certain areas to almost say, right, if there's innovation in this space, we need to fast track it because the long-term societal bad that's happening is worth us kind of making some special cases around certain things we eat, and even certain chemicals or materials that we produce as well.
And that is something interesting I learned in debating with you, and while eating your illegal cookies, because well, you said you're able to give them away for free. You're just not allowed to sell them, right? So only partly illegal.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can't sell them. People take them voluntarily, as it were. But obviously, us knowing that we do have the studies that back up the safety of the ingredient, and the now on commercially on the market in the US for 2 years with absolutely no issues from that side as well.
Yeah. So. Yeah, but back to the bigger picture. I mean, it's not only about you. When I look at the way we produce food, concerning health, concerning climate impact, etc., I would always argue, well, we need to fast track anything that's possible. Yours plus whatever else there is. Do you have a feeling that on the level of policymakers, on the level of food and health administrations, there's even a sense for urgency here?
I suspect the case is because food safety in Europe is centralized. So the European Food Standards Agency is a centralized body. So whereas policy around things like food is made on a national level to a greater extent as well. So countries have a greater degree of freedom, and so those two things don't sit well together, because you have a national government that doesn't really understand the regulatory landscape, which means that it's not making pushing to change anything in that centralized kind of way that the food regulatory system is run at the moment. It all seems a bit kind of far away and difficult, and so we'll leave that as it is because we've got enough things on our plate already as a national government to deal with. So changing the food standards laws across the whole of Europe, and the way we do food regulation across the whole of Europe is one on the very bottom of the pile. I don't know the prospect for it, but actually some national lead to allow food to be tested in a way similar to the US, where you have that expert panel that comes together and then sticks very strict guidelines around how we can use the ingredients. So it's not just we do this GRAS process and we can then put our ingredient into every single food. It's very carefully calculated based on what an average person might consume, and therefore in terms of the mixture of foods they have, maybe chocolate, ice cream, a biscuit, how much could they eat in a day, and therefore how much would they be exposed to. And if this expert panel says, okay, across these categories, we're going to be exposed to below 15 grams or 20 grams on average, then that's we feel comfortable with that, and therefore you can use your ingredient in these very specific categories to this amount in each category, and therefore we're comfortable that we're going to keep consumers safe as well. We don't have that same logic in Europe at the moment in terms of giving food companies a stepping stone or a leg up to do the commercial part that is also so important when you're starting any sort of business, to prove out that actually, yes, you can make it, but does anybody want it? And that's the, if you can't do that, then it makes it very difficult to do business in that part of the world.
To summarize, we do have a interesting solution here, replacing sugar in food. Much lower calories, much lower ecological impact, behaves as fiber in your body, etc. We've elaborated on all of this, and it comes from UK, and wonderful team. Jeremy is part of the team, but for safety reasons, we will not be able to have it in Europe anytime soon. Well, on your way to global dominance, you will conquer Europe as well, I suppose, but rather on other places, in other areas of the world, which in itself makes it a second interesting story. And I wanted to highlight both aspects of it. Did we forget anything important, Jeremy?
That story is companies, especially deep tech companies like ours. You mentioned the team. We are a very small company of just under 30 people, headquartered in Cambridge in the UK. But we draw these people from across the globe to bring their technical and commercial expertise to what we're doing. And so we have that global kind of mind view as well. And so we can be based in Cambridge. We can have our first market in the US. We can think about our plans of coming back to Europe, where actually we did our very first manufacturing trials were done in Germany. And it will be a bit of a circular route, and it could take between 5 and 10 years until we're back with our ingredients in Germany. That's the mindset, and we go, we swim with the current to allow us to bring this to market and bring this to the world, because we believe that it's something that's important to get out there. So despite the challenges, we'll find a way of making it work.
Safe travels on that journey. And please definitely call me when you're ready to come to Germany. But I'm pretty sure we'll be in contact before that, and just follow up on what is happening here and what is possible here. And the question, which goes back to all of us, are we fast enough promoting the change we need? And this is just a simple case study for that question, I think. There's a lot to be learned. Thanks, Jeremy, for sharing your insights and for everything you do. The link to Supplant will be in the show notes, so everyone can just have a look and follow you. Jeremy Jentys is your name, and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Michael. That was great fun, most enjoyable, and I hope people bump into our products if they are over in the US and give them a try. We're available at all the airports.
Thanks, all the best.
Sie hörten Karls Zukunft der Woche, ein Podcast aus dem Karl Institute for Human Future.